You're watching My Michigan TV.
It's time for Lehto Live. Join author, historian, radio host, and YouTube sensation Steve Lehto as he breaks down Michigan's top stories, talks with business leaders and professional experts, and checks out the variety of statewide festivals and events that Michigan has to offer. You're watching Lehto Live on My Michigan TV.
And welcome to My Michigan Television. It's a Monday. We had quite a weekend, didn't we? I spent part of the day shoveling, which I told you I don't like to do. We got so much snow Friday night to Saturday morning. It was crazy. And then, of course, Sunday, it all started to melt. So it was one of those brief snowstorms. But since it happened over the weekend, I guess it probably didn't cause too much disruption. But today is 35 degrees. We're going to hit 40. And they are still calling for all of the days ahead of us, as far as I can see on my 10-day weather app, to all have highs above freezing. So all the highs are above freezing. What snow we got out there will melt. We are approaching the summertime. We have good things ahead of us. Now, Detroit has just recorded its 7th warmest winter on record, according to the National Weather Service. Winter's been one of the warmest and least snowy on record, according to data released by the National Weather Service. Kara Berg writes this for Detroit News. Detroit's highest temperature hit 60 on January 4th, 60 degrees, and also on February 15th. It's crazy. That's more than double the normal average, which is 28.4. The year's average temperature so far is 33.4, so we're way above average. The warmer than average weather made this year the 7th warmest winter on record. And they've been keeping them records since 1874. It was also the 21st wettest winter and the 29th least snowy, according to the National Weather Service. Those aren't real contenders for records, though. The area saw 2 inches more precipitation average, but 16 inches less snow than average. So not a lot of snow. Average snowfall for Detroit is about 35 inches, and the area saw just below 19 so far. Now, Flint and Saginaw also had warmer and wetter winters than average. Of course, I'm wearing my Saginaw Spirit shirt. Flint saw temperatures 5.6 degrees above normal, about half an inch less precipitation than normal, and 11 inches less snow, making it the 44th least snowy winter, according to the National Weather Service. 8th warmest winter on record since 1921. Saginaw's average temperature was 30.3, nearly 5 degrees warmer than the normal average temperature, according to the National Weather Service. The 6th warmest winter on record since 1912. We had about half an inch more precipitation than normal, but 6 inches less snow than average. Speaking of Saginaw, I mentioned I worked in Saginaw at the radio station up there a while back. And I'm recently been reading a book by a guy named Alexis de Tocqueville, who was a French explorer, believe it or not, who came to America in the 1830s. And by explorer, I mean he actually went out of his way to go visit the frontiers and tramp through the wilderness. And he wrote a book called Democracy in America, but he also wrote some essays about his travels. They're absolutely fascinating. And I'm reading one of them right now, and it's called A Fortnight in the Wilderness. About 2 weeks he spent traveling, much of it in Michigan. And he talks about how he comes to Detroit in 1830, I think it was, when the population of the town was about 2,000. And he asks some people about exploring. He goes, I want to go see the wilderness. And they go, why? And he goes, I just want to see what's there. I'm like, no, you don't. You don't want to do that. You know, and everywhere he goes, people are trying to talk him out of it. It's like, what do you mean? They go, no. Just take the trail, go to Chicago, and then, maybe go visit this other town. But you don't want to go into the woods, basically, is what the wilderness was back then in this part of the country. And he said, no, I want to. And they said, do you understand that all you're going to encounter in the woods are mosquitoes, wild animals, and Indians, none of which will appreciate you being there? And he's like, I don't care. I want to go. So him and another traveler set out from Detroit and headed up to Pontiac. And it took them more than a day to get there. and on foot, but they had horses, so they were moving a little faster than other people. Douglas Houghton made the same trip in 1837, but he did it with a bunch of people who were on foot. It took them several days. They made it to Royal Oak on night one. So Alexis de Tocqueville makes it to Pontiac, spends the night in a hotel there, and there's actually a hotel there, which is kind of amazing. And he asks a guy who's the proprietor of the hotel, he says, well, I want to go on to Saginaw. And the guy goes, no, you don't. He goes, yes, I do. The guy goes, why would you want to go to Saginaw? And it's just funny because the guy keeps hammering on how you do not want to go to Saginaw. You don't want. And so he basically finally concedes. He goes, look, if you're going to go, you go to Flint, which is further up the trail. And in Flint, you need to hire guides because the trail from Flint to Saginaw is so unmarked and cuts through such wild territory, you will get lost and you will never come back. So you best hire a guide in Flint. So Alexis and his traveling partner get on their horses, ride to Flint. And at that point in time, Flint is just a couple of houses near a river, the Flint River. And they spend the night there. And then they ask somebody, they go, we'd like to hire some guides. They said, well, you need to hire some local Indians then. So they found them a couple Indians who would accompany these guys. And by the way, on foot, the Indians had no trouble keeping up with these white men on horseback, which is also funny. And then they set off through the woods. But again, the guys were like, why would you want to go to Saginaw? You don't want to go to Saginaw. And it was not that there's anything wrong with Saginaw. It's just that Saginaw at that point in time was so far away from civilization, seemingly, that they said anybody who's just, not an outdoorsman, these guys were just, they were from France, they're exploring, but they were basically guys who lived in a city, back in France. They're used to all the comforts of living in a city. And they're like, you understand, you're going to be sleeping on the ground, okay? You're going to be going through woods where there's bears and wolves and in the summertime, mosquitoes. And they talk about the diseases and illnesses you can catch while you're out in the woods. They talk about the fever, which is what you get when you've been out in the woods too long and eating bad food and sleeping under bad conditions and getting wet when it rains and all of this stuff. You don't want to go to Saginaw. So when I saw this shirt come up on my rotation today, I said, oh, I like Saginaw. But Alexis de Tocqueville was told you do not want to go to Saginaw. But along the way, he describes the forests. And it's one of those things, if you've never been to Hartwick Pines, the Estevan Pines in Michigan, where you can actually see what the forest looked like back then. He was walking through and riding his horse through forests that had not been touched by the axe, as they say. And so there were pine trees and maples and oaks that were hundreds of years old and whole forests filled with them. And as he's going through there, he's describing all of this. And he says, yeah, and he goes, I'm reasonably certain that within a decade or two, this will all be gone. And he was right. He was right. And Saginaw, of course, became one of the primary focal points of the lumber industry because right at the mouth of the river there, it comes out into the bay, Saginaw Bay. They set up a bunch of sawmills, and they would float the logs down the rivers to get to the sawmills there. So, but it's an amazing picture that he paints of going on this exploration trip, but all the people trying to talk him out of going. You don't want to go to Saginaw. Hey, Keith, how you doing, my friend? Good to see you. Yeah, don't forget, there are beavers out there too. All kinds of animals in the woods, but the beavers will leave you alone. It's the bears and the wolves, I think, are the two primary ones people are scared about. Now, I mentioned before, we had that big storm a couple weeks ago. A lot of people lost power. Then we had another storm where people lost power. And of course, we had 6 inches of snow overnight Friday to Saturday. So there are still a lot of people without power as of this morning, which I find amazing. Thousands of DTE customers wait for power Monday morning, according to Detroit News. About 25,000 DTE Energy customers remained in the dark early this morning after the large storm swept through southeast Michigan, dropping as much as 10 inches of snow in some areas, and it downed another 2,000 power lines. So that followed a wet and windy storm Friday. About 220,000 customers initially were without power, with snowfall totals about a half a foot in several communities. DTE reported just over 6 inches fell in the city of Detroit, breaking a record there for early March. DTE reported about 25,000 customers without power early this morning, though 98% of them, of the customers in general, were unaffected. The utilities outage map showed most of the outages scattered throughout Metro Detroit. Consumers Energy reported 13 customers without power Monday morning. Wouldn't you feel special? You have no power. You have no power after a huge storm. You go, I wonder how many other people are affected. They go, oh, 12 others. You make 13. Gee, just my luck. Trevor Lauer, DTE's president and CEO, said the utilities outage update goal for Sunday was to restore power to most of its customers in about 90 schools, so districts could reopen Monday. Schools often do get priority, and I understand that. Friday, we had really heavy snow and winds come back into the service territory after we had the ice storm. Been really hard on our customers, Lauer said. As we roll into tomorrow, we'll be down to a very small number of customers, maybe 15 to 20,000. The utility said trees and branches damaged by last week's ice storm broke from the weight of the heavy snow and ice and fell onto power lines and other equipment, leading to outages. More than 2,000 wires were down, the utility reported. A friend of mine called me on Friday and said he came home and found a branch had broken off a tree and is leaning against a line that runs out to one of his buildings. And so he was having to deal with that. The National Weather Service said the heavy snow, which cut a swath from Jackson through northern Metro Detroit, broke records in various cities, including 6.2 inches in Detroit, whose record for the date was 6 back in 1875. Highest snowfall accumulations extended from Kalamazoo to Lansing and Jackson, with 6 to 10 inches of snow. The National Weather Service said the snowfall was so intense, up to 3 inches an hour, and that some people actually observed thunder snow. Thunder snow. The wet snow piled up quickly on trees and power lines. An ice storm February 22nd knocked out power for more than 700,000 DTE customers. Lauer said such strong weather events appear to be the new normal. We need to continue to invest in our system and harden our system so we can deal with this new normal, the stronger weather patterns that continue to hit Michigan. So it does seem like it's not all spread out like it used to be. It's kind of like nothing and then boom, nothing and then boom. It might just be the way I'm perceiving it, but that does seem to be what we've been having happen lately. So that's crazy. But so a lot of people still had no power this morning. But the good news is, as they get those numbers smaller and smaller, I think they can get to more and more people faster. So you don't have power, it should be coming back on pretty soon. But I have not lost power lately. But I know that if you lose this time of the year, it can be very, very uncomfortable. So you may have to dig up a generator or something. And every single time this happens, I know there's a run on those Generac units at Home Depot. Because everyone's like, never again will I let that happen. So in just a second, we're going to talk about a pretty cool lottery story. And then later on, help for the elderly. A lot of people deal with these issues nowadays, and it's good to know that there's help out there for you if you're dealing with an elderly person in your family. So stick around. We'll do that right after this on My Michigan Television.
We've all been looking forward to a return to normalcy, especially when it involves a breath of fresh air, a dip in the water, the chance to explore, or just the opportunity to take a break and enjoy the view. Our time is now. Start making your plans now to visit Ludington at pureluddington.com.
My Michigan TV is streaming everywhere on Apple TV, Roku, Fire TV, and more smart TV apps. My Michigan TV is on your phone too. Take us with you wherever you go. Just search for My Michigan TV on your favorite app store or visit mymitv.com. All Michigan, streaming everywhere. My Michigan TV.
Every now and then we hear those stories about somebody who won the lottery or lotto, and then they lost the ticket, or they won, they didn't know it, and they found a ticket. I even heard a story a long time ago about somebody who found a ticket blowing along the sidewalk. They picked it up and checked it as a winner. And you wonder about that. So it happens. People buy lottery tickets, I think, so often that they stop thinking like, oh, I got to check this immediately. So we were in shock. Former $1 million Powerball ticket nearly cost Lansing woman, Maisha Johnson, writes the Detroit News, a $1 million Powerball ticket tucked away in a coat pocket for a week was almost forgotten by a Lansing family. So they had the winning ticket, but did not know it. The woman matched 5 numbers in the drawing on February 6th and purchased her winning ticket from a Safeway food center on West Michigan Avenue in Lansing, according to a February 28th Michigan Lottery Post. Me and my husband buy a Powerball ticket for every drawing, and we always knew we would win big. Everybody thinks that. I purchased Powerball ticket as usual. I gave it to my husband to hold on to. And a week after the drawing, my husband found the ticket in his coat pocket and realized we had never checked it. We went to the store to scan it. And got a message to file a claim. We checked the numbers online, realized we'd won $1 million. We were in shock. $1 million. We always had a feeling this day would come, and now it's here. It's surreal, she said. According to the Michigan Lottery's Post, she had visited the lottery headquarters to claim her prize and plans to pay some bills, fund her children's education, and save money with the winnings. The current Powerball jackpot stands at an estimated $20 million. Next drawing is tonight. Powerball is the multi-state lottery available in 45 states, the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. I don't play until they cross 700 million, but I do play. And I know I'm throwing my money out the window. I know that. But when the jackpot is $700 million or higher, you pay a couple bucks to get the ticket just so you can legitimately go through the mental exercise. What would I do if I won? What would I do? If you don't buy the ticket, you can't do that. And I've mentioned before, I think, one of my brothers works at a place with a bunch of other people, and a bunch of them do a pool. They all kick in a couple of bucks, and they all are in the pool, and if they ever won, they'd split it. And they would often sit around the lunch tables talking about what they'd do if they won. And one of his coworkers who refused to participate in the pool would sit there and talk about what he would do. And they would stop him and say, you don't get to play. That's not how this works. You can't fantasy spend money. You have zero chance of winning. And now, of course, as a person buying a lottery ticket, you don't have a big chance of winning, but you've got a chance. It is a mathematical chance. So you have the right to say, if I got $700 million, I get a chrome-plated Lamborghini. Who knows what you do? But you can do those silly things, and you can think about it because you have the hypothetical possibility of winning. So it's good that she says that she's got some useful things to do with the money. Of course, how she spends the money is up to her, entirely up to her. But it sounds like she's a responsible person, so that's good. Congratulations to the woman and her husband who won but had forgotten they had the ticket. And imagine if you ran that coat through the wash, for instance. You pull the ticket out, you're trying to figure out if it's still good or not. You'd have to be able to read the numbers on it, I would assume. But meanwhile, if you've ever dealt with an elderly parent or an elderly relative, and I have a couple times in my life, and it's a very, very difficult thing sometimes. So there is a program that people need to know about called the PACE program, PACE program, P-A-C-E, PACE, for elderly. It's been around for 50 years, but people don't know about it. So Patricia Anstedt wrote this article. 4 days a week, Judith Wright pushes her walker to board a bus that takes her to a bustling Sterling Heights center where she hangs out with friends, sees her doctor and her healthcare team. She gets 2 hot meals. She works out in a physical therapy session, which helps build her walking and her balance. Most days, her first stop is this at the PACE Southeast Michigan program in the green room. She said, we call ourselves the party people. She's a 76-year-old widow who lives with her 50-year-old son in Shelby Township. She holds up a wrist with a bracelet she made with the Green Room Bunch. Her ceramics and senior Olympics medals for horseshoe and balloon tossing make her son wonder just how many more shelves she might need to hold them all. Through PACE, Wright, who is a diabetic with anemia and limited mobility, she's received all kinds of free help: an electric lift chair, a bed rail, eyeglasses, other accommodations. She takes 17 medicines. All are free through the program. In 6 years, I haven't even bought an aspirin, she says. PACE centers also have a health clinic and an urgent care center, as well as home services and other free items that are covered by Medicare. If we had to pay for everything they've given us, we'd be living out of my car, her son said. After a rare recent hospitalization for her anemia, the team came to her home, as it does for many of its participants. Now, Wright is a mother of 3. She worked out of the home for 30 years outside the home, first as a beautician and then later as an accounting department employee, but not enough to give her substantial savings. So she herself has been a caregiver several times for others. Her son recalls growing up with his grandma in the house. It's just what I learned. His mom's time at the center gives him a needed break and allows him to work part-time as a dollar store cashier. Still, his caregiver job is substantial, though he shrugs it off. She took care of me until I was 18. Now it's my turn. His mom's time at the center gives him a needed break and allows him to work part-time. So this is the program that not a lot of people know about. And so the program is called PACE, and it stands for Program for All-Inclusive Care for the Elderly. And it dates back to 1973. In San Francisco, when concerns among Asian families who viewed nursing homes as an unacceptable solution for their aging elders prompted the opening of an adult daycare program with other services, and the idea has spread. In 1994, Southeast Michigan became one of the first pilot projects in the PACE program as part of the Henry Ford Health System. Henry Ford now owns 55% of PACE Southeast Michigan, and Presbyterian Villages of Michigan owns 45%. PACE's Metro Detroit regional programs serve 1,600 older adults at 7 centers. Those are in Dearborn, East Point, Pontiac, Southfield, Sterling Heights, and there's 2 in Detroit, in Rivertown and on the northwest side. An 8th center is being added this year in Clinton Township, and a 9th is planned next year for Westland. Statewide, there's 14 PACE programs at 24 different centers. Nationwide, PACE has 273 programs in 32 states. Surprisingly, even though it's been around 50 years, PACE is not widely known. It's one of the countless resources older adults and their families may sort through and often miss looking for help so their loved ones can continue living at home. And I've been in a situation before where someone who was elderly, living by themselves, for instance, and they couldn't do that anymore. And the question then becomes, does somebody move in with them and take care of them? Do they move into somebody else? Do you put them in a home? And all of these are extremely difficult decisions to make. And oftentimes there's a lot of pushback from somebody who says, I don't want to be put in a home. I like living by myself. And there comes a time sometimes where you might want to live by yourself, but you can't. And nobody ever wants to admit that that's the case. So it sounds like this PACE program is a great opportunity for someone who is decided to, okay, fine, you live with me or I'll live with you, whatever it is, but can't do it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so there are these centers that you can go to and you get taken care of there. So the biggest drawback of the PACE program are that applicants must be certified as frail enough to qualify for nursing home care, and participation is largely for those with limited incomes, though any Medicare recipient can apply and pay for the program at $4,000 or more a month, depending on where they live. Nearly half of the people coming to the PACE Sterling Heights Center are so-called dual eligibles. There are people 55 or older who meet the qualifications for both Medicare and Medicaid. The average participant is a 76-year-old woman who is single, divorced, or widowed without a big savings account, just like Wright, the one we talked about at the top of the story. By enrolling in PACE, a person moves all of their health insurance to a PACE program. PACE combines payments from Medicare, Medicaid, and private pay sources to cover its services. Research shows that PACE programs, though costly because they cover so many services, provide a higher level of care that keeps older adults out of nursing homes and hospitals. And that's according to the CEO of PACE of Southeast Michigan, Mary Neighbor. A summary of several academic research studies about the PACE program published in the academic journal Geriatrics in 2022 said that the PACE participants had lower rates of hospital use and shorter lengths of stay in hospitals compared with other programs. They tended to live longer than patients who were cared for in nursing homes. We have a whole team that wraps their arms around them and keeps them from going to the hospital. That's where the quality improves, when they stay in their homes. And that is one of the things that a lot of people don't stop to think about. But if you've seen enough of this, you know this is true. That a lot of people, as they get older, often find themselves more and more isolated. As their children move off and their spouse passes away, their parents are long gone, and they find themselves more and more isolated in their home, okay? And so if something happens medically and they go to a hospital, that often seems like that is a huge step backwards, because although they might not be isolated at the hospital, they're often confined to a bed, and there's this impersonal aspect of doctors and nurses who come in and are working on them or working with them, but they're not at home anymore. And simply changing that environment from one place to the other can have a huge impact on a person emotionally, intellectually, and physically. And we've heard these stories before about somebody who got sick and they went to the hospital and they declined rapidly. And I'm convinced that a portion of that is simply that you took them out of the environment where they were the most comfortable and put them someplace strange. And hospitals are strange, okay? And so, I mean, I'm being kind by saying that. Many people who are in the hospital are freaked out about it, and understandably so. And it's been a long, long time, but I had an occasion many, many years ago where I spent a couple nights in the hospital, and I could not get comfortable. I don't care what, I mean, never mind why I was there. Trying to sleep through the night in a hospital is probably more difficult than falling asleep like in a crashing airplane or something. It really, I could not do it. I could not do it. So by its very nature, PACE also supports caregivers. Academic research illustrates that support for caregivers can improve their emotional well-being. A study conducted in Spain and reported in the Journal of the Economics of Aging found that direct support for home care, as well as financial subsidies to pay things such as lost wages, both contributed to lower incidence of depressive symptoms for caregivers. And that's one of the things. And again, I've known several people, and I've been related to people, let's just say, who had to do something with their older parents taking care of them. And one of the things that they'll tell you is that one of the reasons that they felt like they were on the brink was that it was stretching them to their limits, because your parent, let's just say it's a parent, is retired and they need care, but they don't like the idea of going to a home. They don't like the idea of a nurse moving in. So a child who has a full-time job and possibly a family, on top of those obligations, now is spending a lot of time taking care of a parent. And they might love doing it. They might say, I don't consider this a burden. This is not a job. But it does take time and it does take a toll. And I've seen it happen before where the people who were taking care of somebody got to the point where like, we can't handle this anymore. It's beyond our abilities. So some PACE participants cannot make it to the program centers. Nearly half have some stage of dementia. In those cases, PACE brings its team and resources to a person's home, as it does, for instance, for a woman named Gracie, who's 96 years old and she lives in Detroit. And by the way, I actually know a young lady named Gracie. When I met her, she said, my name is Gracie. And I said, really? I never imagined a woman under the age of 25 named Gracie. And she said, no, yeah, it's an unusual name. My parents liked it, and that's my name. So here's another woman named Gracie who's 96. Miss Gracie, as her family calls her, is a double amputee from diabetic complications and has dementia. Until her second leg amputation in 2018, she lived alone in her Northwest Detroit home. One of her 4 daughters lives with her. Her youngest daughter is her legal caregiver and accompanies her to all of her medical appointments or makes arrangements for them. But her youngest daughter is 65 years old. So they gave them free medical supplies because the mom's Medicare plan didn't pay for everything. A leadership development consultant with a doctorate degree. The daughter started searching the internet, and that's when she discovered PACE. They sent out an occupational therapist and a physical therapist, and then I took her to the PACE Dearborn Clinic for an exam. This is where I got hooked. At the clinic, they found an open wound, likely from her wheelchair. They also sent a worker to her home to clean and care for the wound until it healed. And then she taught my sister how to clean the wound. So they took care of that. They assessed what she needed, made sure she got what she needed until she was in a place where she was stable. So it's a fantastic program. It's called PACE. The story is much longer, and we'll continue with the story and more details on the PACE program right after this on My Michigan Television.
I've been on the road, out here with the squad. Everybody trying to go, yeah, the party jumping off. And we putting on a show, trying to catch a vibe. We do this every time, like, this is where I wanna be, never ever gonna leave, you ain't gonna get it from me, I'm like,
I love the Q&A commercial. I recognize all those places. So we're talking about the PACE program, and the daughter says, every time I took my mother to the clinic, they'd ask, is she taking her insurance? How many a day? How many do you need? Are you having challenges getting her food? Do you need anything? The focus is on her overall care and her overall health. She's not been back in the hospital since she entered the program in 2018. Now, Miss Gracie does wake up later once her vitals are assessed, her diabetes medicines administered, and she's cleaned, dressed, and fed. She watches TV, often Western westerns and dozes in her favorite chair in front of her living room window. Lately, the daughter is not sure her mom always recognizes her, which adds, of course, the physical and mental stress she feels. That would be worse, she said, if she didn't have an entire team at Pace to help watch out for her. It's vigorous to be responsible for an adult parent whom you always have known to be the strongest and who now totally depends on you, not only for their daily care, but for all the medical choices and everything else. It gets weary because you're paying them attention all day, but then you're not sleeping well at night. You're always concerned about her. It gets to be overwhelming sometimes. The weariness is the demand on our time, on your mind, on your body. It's mentally and physically exhausting. Some days, I've just gone to the bathroom and cried. She and her sister switch off so they can take a vacation or get a break. Now, she considers her job caring for her mother the best way to thank her for the sacrifice that Miss Gracie made for her. And of course, telling the story moves her to tears. Gracie and her late husband, who died in 1980. Think about that. She's 96 years old, but her husband died in 1980. Adopted her and her three sisters. When they were found, the children were being neglected. She was God's gift to me. He sent me to her. So he sent me and my sisters too a gift. What I do is my gift back to her. So Gracie adopted the daughters years ago. And then Gracie's husband died in 1980. And here we are, more than 40 years later. And now the adopted daughters are taking care of her. She fully expects her mother to be able to live out her life at home. If she can't, Pace has relationships with nursing homes, including the Greenhouse Project, a national model that strives to provide other adults, older adults, with small living facilities with care teams assigned around the clock. We generally like people to die the way they wish. Many die in their home with comfort care. Some may go into a hospice program. Social workers help carry out advanced care directives and other end-of-life requests. Most of the people we care for have not had proper care all their life. What PACE does is provide all that they need in a true relationship model where they can grow to trust what we do. Most of them never had that kind of care. And, you know, it's an amazing program, it sounds like. So I hope that you look into this if there's anybody in your life that might benefit from this. It's the PACE program, P-A-C-E, PACE program. And it's a difficult conversation to have with a lot of people because, you know, I read that sentence. We generally like people to die the way they wish. Nobody wants to talk about dying. You don't want to talk about dying. You don't want to die, you know, so why would you want to talk about it? And yet, unfortunately, we learned that pretty much we're all going to die. And so it's something you have to deal with on one level or another. But there are people out there, and I've done videos recently on my channel about nurses, and I've pointed out that nurses are highly skilled and talented people, but they also do stuff that most people wouldn't have the ability to do, meaning that they couldn't do it. And I know darn well that nurses I've seen and dealt with and talked to do stuff that I could not do. I'm not talking about the training of it. I'm talking about if you said, Steve, your job's going to involve this, 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 and this every single day. No, I can't do that. I wouldn't be able to do that. I don't have the constitution for it. That's not something I'd be capable of doing. And I met a woman years ago, and I got to talking to her, and she was a nurse. And I said, "What do you do? I'm curious. What do you do? Do you work for a hospital? What do you?" She goes, "No." She goes, "Actually, I work in an area, and I oversee hospice care." She goes, "The average patient, the average person that I see, that I deal with, is a person in an end-of-life situation who's literally got a couple weeks to live. They know it, their doctors know it, family knows it, I know it." And so she said, "I go in and see these people on a regular basis, and I basically help them through that last period of their life." And I said, "So how long do you know these people for?" And she said, "Quite often, a week, 2 weeks. And she said, and yeah, what you're thinking is correct. She said, I see them for the first time and I assess them and I do what I can for them. Of course, with a doctor's, help. But she said the most part, many of these people pass away within a week or two. So she goes, I get a note saying this person passed away. There's no need for you to go there anymore. But here's a new person for you to go see. So she goes and sees somebody. She meets them, evaluates them, works with them. Sometimes she meets the family. Sometimes she meets the doctors, whatever. A week or two later, that person passes away. They say, okay, here's someone else for you to see. That person passed away. And so her job consisted of constantly meeting people who are going to pass away very shortly. And, I've worked in businesses where I've met people. As an attorney, I meet people. And I have a couple times met somebody who passed away, but I wouldn't have been able to cope with that if that was what happened to every single person I dealt with. And I asked her, I said, how do you deal with that? And she said, you know something? Someone's got to do it. And I do it. And I'm sure it wasn't easy for her. But I think she just looked at it and said, okay, there's a need. And I've got the training to help people with that need. So I'm going to step up and do that. And I just saw that description that she gave me about what she did on a daily basis for her job. That was her full-time job. All she did was drive around and meet people in their homes who were in end-of-life situations. And I thought, there's no way. I couldn't deal with that. But somebody's got to deal with it, and that's what she does. So my hat is off to people who work in these fields, who are there to help people. They're often described as angels, and I think that's a very apt description for them. And so, like I said, very talented, very highly trained, skilled. I hope they're appreciated by everyone as much as I appreciate them. But when I heard my friend's story about what she did, I'd never stopped to think about that. And of course, when you hear somebody describe the job they had, you go, okay, that makes sense. I understand someone's got to do that. But it had never dawned on me that that's what somebody would be doing for a living. So it's unbelievable. This is My Michigan Television. I'm Steve Lehto. We meet every day, Monday through Friday from 11 till 12 to talk about stuff happening in and around Michigan. Got to tell you, we've got an exciting new program on My Michigan Television. It's called My Kitchen with Jake. My Kitchen, M-I, Kitchen, My Kitchen with Jake. It's an hour-long program. Right now, it's simply one that's on our website. So you go to the website and check out all the various programs that are there. My Kitchen with Jake. And so everything that you'd want to know about a kitchen in Michigan with Jake, Jake will help you out. So there you go, My Kitchen with Jake. Meanwhile, I got to tell you something. As a guy who's into cars in southeastern Michigan, I've known about this for some time now. There's a place in Milford called the GM Proving Ground. And I've heard about this place all my life. I've known people who worked there. I've known people who spent time there. And I've driven past it many, many times. And I saw an article in today's Free Press that says fast facts about GM Proving Ground in Milford, from top secrets to the 150-mile-an-hour test drives. And this is the GM Milford Proving Ground. And like I said, I'm familiar with it. Chrysler's got a proving ground also. They got one in Auburn Hills. They've also got one out at Chelsea. Okay. And Ford's got proving grounds all over the place, including one out in Kingman, Arizona. I know all about because I had a brother who worked at Ford. And he'd occasionally go to Kingman to do some testing to see how robust those suspensions were. And so the fast facts about the Michigan proving ground for General Motors in Milford, I was fascinated to read because we've all heard of it, but not many of us have seen it from the inside. So the site straddles Oakland and Livingston counties. It's about 4 miles away from Milford and about 45 minutes drive from Detroit. It's west of Detroit. The Proving Ground is a historic place, and it will turn 100 years old next year. So they were doing proving out there in 1924. So it's also home to deer, foxes, eagles, and pretty much all of General Motors' top secret future projects. So the vehicles that General Motors sells throughout the world are partly developed and thoroughly tested at the Proving Grounds by some of the best drivers and engineers in the world. These folks are the top guns of driving, capable of evaluating every performance aspect of a car while taking laps around a racetrack at speeds that can go above 150 miles per hour. The site is also a staple of economic stability for the surrounding communities that rely on the workers there for revenue. Guess how many workers there are at the GM Proving Ground? 4,900. 4,900 workers at the GM Proving Ground. That's how big this place is. So it cost about $100,000 back when they bought the property in 1923. It occupies about 4,000 acres of land. There are lakes on the property where they actually let employees fish if they're so inclined. And it's teeming with wildlife and actually contains the highest point in Oakland County. Now, I ran a foot race years ago, someplace out in that area. It may have been the Labor Day race that they used to run out of Milford. But I remember running up a really steep hill. And the entire time on one side was a tall fence. The Proving Ground is the other side. But yeah, there's some hills out that way. Now, the full name of the site is the General Motors Milford Proving Ground, but it's singular. But like Meyer, Kroger, or Ford Motor Company, this is one of those names that many people will put an S on the end of, like Myers or Kroger's or Ford's. I work at Ford's. But it's just the Proving Ground, the Proving Ground. There are secret labs with state-of-the-art virtual technology where engineers can drive on the moon and do the GMC Hummer EV's famous crab walk long before the vehicle ever did it on the road or in public or in a commercial. So the site operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. It's self-contained. It uses its own wells for water. It has a wastewater treatment facility. It employs its own firefighters. It has licensed EMTs, a hazardous materials response team, confined space rescue team, and road patrol officers, along with a fully staffed medical department. So the Proving Ground facility is basically a small town. It has everything you'd need: law enforcement, medical stuff, emergency response, its own water, waste, everything. It is basically a small town. The site is heavily guarded because all of GM's prototypes of future cars are there, hidden from spy photographers, either behind closed doors, under camouflage, or for super top secret projects, tested only in the dark of night to shield it from drone photos. They're worried about drone overflights. The engineers who work at the grounds are trained to drive like professional race car drivers, so they can test vehicles to the limits. The level of license is based on the speed a driver is allowed to go. GM has about 81,000 salaried employees globally, but fewer than 100 of them have passed the driving tests to do the top speed test driving on the Proving Ground. Meanwhile, there are 147 miles of test courses, including the Milford Road course, which is a racetrack that mimics parts of the famous Nürburgring in Germany. So it's an amazing facility. There's a lot more of these fun facts we can talk about in just a second, right after this break on My Michigan Television.
Welcome to Mackinac Island.
We were just named the #1 island destination in the continental U.S. by Travel and Leisure magazine.
We are proud of our little slice of paradise.
And hope we have a chance to visit soon.
So hop on in
and treat yourself to fascinating history
delicious island traditions,
and an unforgettable nightlife.
We look forward to seeing you soon on Mackinac Island.
My Michigan TV is streaming everywhere on Apple TV, Roku, Fire TV, and more smart TV apps. My Michigan TV is on your phone too. Take us with you wherever you go. Just search for My Michigan TV on your favorite app store or visit mymitv.com. All Michigan, streaming everywhere. My Michigan TV.
We're talking about General Motors' Milford Proving Ground. Big article explains a lot of the inside secrets that most people don't know about. And we mentioned there's 147 miles of test course roads in there, but that includes every kind of roadway. So the road surfaces at the tracks vary from dirt roads to hills to bumpy concrete, with some that have potholes in them on purpose. Because you got to test a vehicle what it's going to be like in the real world, right? They got 6 lanes of banked concrete on a 5-mile circle track to a straightaway with no speed limit to the speedway-ready 3-mile Milford Road course. There's also the Black Lake. It's a slab of black asphalt that in the sunlight gives the illusion that it is water. It's the size of 59 football fields and is one of the largest vehicle dynamic pads in the world, used for a variety of tests on various aspects of cars, such as vehicle handling. One of the biggest questions is, if you get a car going fast, really, really fast, number one, how long does it take to stop? And number two, if you get it going really, really fast and then turn it sideways, at what point will it skid sideways versus at what point will the tires maintain traction? Both of those are important to know, but you don't want to do those tests on a regular piece of road because you lose control of the car. Some cars will want to roll over when you turn them too sharply. And some cars, when you hit the brakes, aren't going to stop fast enough. So a big, wide open piece of blacktop the size of 59 football fields is where you want to do those tests. One of the smaller test tracks that is no less intriguing is their Belgian block, a 2-mile-long replica of the real brick road that ran from Antwerp to Brussels, which was discovered during World War I by U.S. soldiers. Portions of the Transformers 4 movie were filmed at the Proving Ground. The filming locations included the oval track and the north-south straightaway course. The oval track was painted with road markings to transport it fictionally to Asia. The 130 miles of guardrails that line nearly every road in the Proving Ground reflect what you see along any major interstate in America. The rails were first developed at the Milford Proving Ground, designed to absorb an impact and pull a car along the rail instead of having it bust through the rail and go off the road. GM is investing millions in virtual technology to test the entire car's performance virtually before ever making a physical prototype and putting it on the road. Virtual technology can get new vehicles to market faster, saving millions of dollars in cost to build physical prototypes. One prototype of a car can cost $100,000, and that's actually quite low. An actual full-size prototype can cost well more than that. I know for a fact that some of the one-off parts on some prototypes can get to be quite expensive. So prototype of a car, $100,000 on the low end, probably much higher. I've never been to this Proving Ground, nor the other ones I mentioned earlier, but I've spoken to people who worked at Chelsea, the Chelsea Proving Ground, and that was built also, I believe, in the 1950s. And they built a big oval out there, and later on they put a road course in the middle. And the reason I know about this is twofold. One is they did a lot of testing for the turbine cars, which I wrote a book about, Chrysler turbine car there, starting in the 1950s. And they ran these turbine cars out at the track. And then in the 1960s, when they were experimenting with the NASCAR vehicles, the winged cars, they tested those at the Proving Grounds. And at one point in time, I interviewed a guy who worked there the entire time. And he worked on turbine cars. He worked on the wing cars. He was a test driver. And I asked him how he got the job. And he said, well, I used to work at a gas station on I-94, or actually where I-94 is now. And he goes, they literally put the highway right through the gas station. So I lost my job. And just then they started building this huge facility out there for Chrysler. Because I went and applied for a job. And they were hiring pretty much everybody they could find. And he got hired originally to work in a wash bay to wash cars before and after they're tested. And he was there for a while, and somebody one day came up to him and says, hey, can you drive? And he's like, yeah, of course I can drive. They go, okay. And they gave him a job driving some really simple stuff or just ferrying cars around. And then eventually they trained him. And so there came a time where he was doing high-speed tests in these cars. But he said most of it was not that exciting. He goes, they'd bring in like a new Volare wagon. And they go, yeah, put 75,000 miles on that. So him and the other guys in the staff would literally take the vehicle out and just drive it for 8 hours, come back, punch the clock, another guy jump in it, drive it for 8 hours, just putting miles on cars. And I said, but come on, you worked there in the age of the Hemi, the Daytona, the turbine car. You must have had some exciting moments. And he goes, yeah, but he goes, most of it was just mundane drudgery. And I go, come on, a Hemi Cuda. Did you ever test a Hemi Cuda? He goes, yes, I did. It was a nightmare. I go, how could that be? The cars now, they're worth like $10 million. He goes, they gave us a Hemi Cuda and gave us very strict instructions. They go, you get in the car here, you drive it 1 mile down the track, you turn it around, back it up, and then drive it a mile back. Turn it around, back it up, drive. He goes, so all you're doing all day long is the cycle of, in essence, coming to a stop, turning the car around, reverse, first, second, third, fourth. Reverse, first, second, third, fourth. Reverse, first. He goes, I don't know if they're testing the transmission, the clutch, the engine. I don't know. And he goes, all day long, I had to do that cycle back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. At the end of my shift, I had to mark down how many times I did it, how many miles were on the car, how many cycles I ran. We're down and back, down and back, down and back. He goes, by the end of that day, he goes, my leg hurt from shifting the clutch. He goes, my arm hurt from shifting the shifter. And he goes, and I hated that car. He also told me one time that they were testing a vehicle's towing capacity. So they put a bumper hitch on a car, slapped a trailer on it, and had him driving around the course that's inside of the 5 mile loop. And he goes, he came around a curve, went up over the hill, and there was a big deer standing there. And he goes, there are actually deer that had got inside the track somehow. And he goes, and I hit this deer, and he goes, I don't remember what happened. He goes, I remember waking up in the hospital. He goes, I literally woke up in the hospital. And he said that they were picking all kinds of broken glass out of his scalp because apparently he either gone through the windshield but this is long before airbags. And he's like, so how's the deer? Sorry, son, the deer didn't make it. But there you go. So those are exciting stories from the Proving Grounds for Chrysler, but the Proving Ground is what they call it in Milford for General Motors. Going to wrap it up for today. I will see you tomorrow, 11 o'clock, right here on My Michigan Television, as I always do, Monday through Friday. And until we talk again, please behave yourself. Bye-bye.
My Michigan TV is streaming everywhere on Apple TV, Roku, Fire TV, and more smart TV apps. My Michigan TV is on your phone, too. Take us with you wherever you go. Just search for My Michigan TV on your favorite app store or visit mymitv.com. All Michigan, streaming everywhere. My Michigan TV.